What is something you have that you're pretty sure no one else has? Linjias said. My dad saved the very button that the King of Sweden pushed to engage a new production line in the factory he worked in. The factory was shut down a few years later and Dad took the opportunity to bring the button with him on his last days of work. Jim the Jersey guy said. The lowest basement level in the Trade Center complex. Below that, bedrock. On the sides, concrete walls going 70 feet up to the surface to keep groundwater infiltrating from the Hudson River at bay. The path tubes ran through it. The company that I worked for had gear down there that I needed to maintain on occasion. Macheat1 said. I'm sure other people have it, but not many people have both. I inherited a real Apollo 11 patch that went to the moon from my grandfather who worked on the mission, and my aunt gave me a Mercury astronaut test helmet worn by Alan Shepard. Badfish 1060 said. I was in charge of the environmental cleanup following the crash. We removed some 6,000 yards of contaminated soil. When we were loading one of the trucks, the NTSB guy spotted it in the dirt and said something to the effect of, "That's a really valuable piece of metal. I wouldn't let it go to the landfill, so I grabbed it and threw it in my truck. It's fairly large. I had planned to do something cool with it, but it turns out it's too hard of a metal alloy for anyone to work with without specialized tools. So now it sits in my garage." The crash was in 2013. It was a cargo plane. The pilots died. Banker Babe 420 said. I have a tiny school book from the 1800s and the covers are filled with the writings of a little girl. I'm trying to track down her descendants to give them this book, because I don't like having something so valuable and irreplaceable in my possession, but there is no other little book like it. It is a history book and many of the entries would now be considered racist, especially toward Native Americans, and also this little girl, and likely her children and grandchildren, are long gone. Squirrel Tail said. That reminds me, I have a book of poems from my great-great-aunt who wrote personal poems through her life from the late 1800s when she went to the big city to learn to be a seamstress and well into the 1900s, and it really captures an essence of what life was like for her back then. Some poems are hilarious, some observational, and one very, very sad one of her little sister who died at age 4 in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Thanks for reminding me. I really need to finish recording the poems on computer and do something with them. If anyone has suggestions, I'd appreciate it. Edit to say wow everyone, thank you so much. This actually makes me really emotional since I promised my late grandmother, who I was close with, and she was close with her great-aunt, that I'd find a way to archive and preserve her poems. Swinella said. My maternal grandmother ended up with an old elementary school book from the late 1800s. I think she got it at a yard sale. I thought it was really cool because the little kid's last name was one I'd heard mentioned as distant family on my paternal side. She gave it to me. After a bit of research, I later found out that it was a long-deceased distant paternal cousin. Dad's family was from 100 miles away. I still think it's cool that it ended up with me. Delightful Absurdity said. My sister had a copy of The Last Unicorn when we lived in Chicago. It was left behind when we moved to Louisiana. She was 10 at the time. Fast forward to junior year of high school, she mentions the book to a classmate. Classmate has a copy, offers to loan it to my sister. Inside the cover was my sister's handwriting, with property of, sister's name, ... Friend let my sister keep it and she still has it to this day. We don't have much idea as to how the book got from Illinois to Louisiana and ended up at the same boarding high school where my sister attended. It's a fun coincidence and a reminder of how small the world is. Albert Caboose said. Wii U is Nintendo's worst-selling console since the Virtual Boy, meaning there are fewer games out there. Seeing as Nintendo fans love to collect things, they will be worth more one day. Source, I used to work at a retro games store and sold someone a rubber fucking band for $10 because it was an official Nintendo branded band from an E3 event. Literally trash used to hold some items together. $10. Nintendo fans are wild. Desire of Endless said. World's longest spinning fidget spinner. My father works for a ball bearing company. They developed the world's longest spinning fidget spinner for the Guinness Book of World Records as a PR piece. He got to keep the spinner after the trials and it now sits at my desk at home. Update, I meant longest in terms of time span, not length. I added a video in the comment thread for those interested. Update 2. I'll add the video here as well. https://youtube.be/a79gfq0d/. Update 3. I mentioned this in the other comments, but to clarify, he got to keep the original prototype. From what he told me, they ended up making more to be given to clients as gifts and be used to in the record-breaking spin. Allocat 9713 said, "My grandfather was on the USS Indianapolis during World War II and was transferred off of it before they delivered the bombs and it sank. He happened to take a book from the ship's library and never returned it. I inherited all of his books and happened to stumble across it while going through them. It's stamped with the ship's library stamp. So unless any other sailor took a book from the library of the USS Indianapolis before it sank and then held onto it all these years, this may be the only one in the world." Alan Cake said, "A human atlas bone from the site of a medieval prison 25 years ago. My then BF was working as the lowest-ranked barrow pusher on a building site. Foreman knew that ancient bones may turn up and knew he was supposed to send for the archaeologists if so. Bones turned up. Foreman said, 'Fuck that, we're filling in, not getting behind schedule for some old shitty prisoner bones.' BF tried to say something but would have been fired if he pushed it. He was pretty horrified but couldn't lose his job, and crept back to take a bone after the site closed. In his mind it was a way of saying we'll remember you, even if you're under concrete. We were only teenagers, so didn't really know what to do with it for the best. I have kept it in a box ever since. I know I should do something with it." Casper Arg said, 800-day streak in Duolingo. Edit. The streak is actually 794. I suppose you will pardon the roundup. I know about streak freezes, but I haven't used more than 4 or 5 of them. The ones that protect your streak for the whole weekend, I've never used those. Language, I went through Japanese, German and Italian, and I've been focusing only on Italian for the last year and a half. I'm a Spanish speaker. Did I learn? Well, as much as you can expect from 5 minutes a day. I guess by now I have a decent tourist level and could more or less handle myself around Italy, but I'm very far from maintaining a casual conversation. Congratulations for all your streaks, higher than mine and otherwise. Keep up learning. You know what happens if you don't." Jamarustia said, "I have a dimple in my thigh from when my mother had an amniocentesis when she was pregnant with me and they hit me with the needle. It's a scar from before birth." Edit. My highest rated comment, and turns out it's not uncommon at all. Mission failed successfully. Potato Truncheon said, "I have a copy of that too. It's great. Note, a friend gave me a ripped copy. Have no idea of the provenance before that. So perhaps not too special on my end. Found this. https://music.youtube.com/watch?vecals KN66DEEVUW8. Not sure if the same thing. Edit. Also have a Pink Floyd LP called Dark Side of the Moon. Not Moon. Picture of a cow in front. The labels of the vinyl itself are named This Side and Other Side. Has a few songs like Embryo, Hit Beat Pig Meat, and a few others I've since forgotten. Fun stuff. Edit. And the code for the record is CUD 382. I might have the number wrong, but it definitely said CUD. B02D said, "This invisible, probably imaginary little splinter stuck since forever in the inner side of my right thigh, which randomly pierces my skin when I'm walking, forcing me to go to a bathroom, pull down my pants and check if it's actually there. Never had anything, but I feel this since I was a kid." Sakara Mycelium said, "As a 9YO kid, I lived with a fish bone that pierced my throat right behind my uvula. Just for like 3 days though. IDK how I managed it. The damn thing was stuck on its blunt end, so the pokey end was poking my uvula sometimes too. My family would just eat a few extra bits of bread to help swallow bones. Tiny bony fish is considered kind of a delicacy where I live, so I tried it in those 3 days, didn't work. Eventually I grabbed a pair of tweezers, settled in front of the mirror and somehow pulled it out without gagging while my mom was freaking out in the background saying she wished I told her sooner. The bone was out before she could mentally go over the complete list of medical places she could take me to. TL, DR, Fish bones are more of a nuisance than a scare. Edgar said, my Nazi German Shepherd puppet. It's from the TV show Danger 5 and I dropped $1,000 on it a few years ago at an auction the producers of the show put on to sell a bunch of props. It's the only one in existence, since I heard the other puppet was lost, which is why it wasn't even part of the auction. For those of you unfamiliar with the show, it's a hilarious Australian comedy about a group of spies who are trying to kill Hitler, but the show, at least the first season, is shot like it's from the 1960s. Here are some of the scenes featuring my puppet. And a bonus video of my puppet watching himself. Probably slacking said. Up until a week ago, I'm out that picked up radio stations. I play in bands, and for years couldn't figure out why whenever I would get close to the microphone, the PA system would pick up local radio stations. I always assumed it was due to crappy unshielded mic cables. Well, I went to the dentist and decided to get my permanent retainer removed. I scheduled an appointment and that night had band practice. I got close to the mic and picked up a radio station. It occurred to me that my retainer, if you're unfamiliar, a permanent one is basically just a steel wire glued in your mouth, was slightly bent and conductive. Sure enough, the next week I got it removed and now I don't pick up radio stations anymore near microphones. Catherine Constance said, I was going to give a smart-ass answer like my exact combination of DNA, but I actually thought of something. Now, I'm not the only person who has this, because a lot of my aunts and uncles and cousins do too, but they aren't all exactly the same. I have a big, Roman Catholic family. The matriarch of it was my dad's mom, who died when I was a toddler, so while I have some memories of her, I don't have many. Me and all my cousins and most of our parents have these gold crosses made out of chunky yellow gold, and embedded in all of them are precious stones from our grandma's bracelets and rings that were extracted from the jewelry after she died. So yes, a lot of us have them, but no two are exactly alike, and no one outside the family is one. Crystal Stark said, an inflatable hot dog from the 106.7 Croc Weenie Roast concert back in June 1995, signed by Bradley Nowell of Sublime, about 11 months before he died, along with Tim Armstrong and Lars Frederiksen of Rancid. Brad, Tim, and Lars were walking through the vendor area along with Ludwig the Dalmatian at 10 p.m. after the show had just ended. I had nothing to sign, but I was a 15-year-old kid who was staring at a musical genius. I ripped the hot dog off one of the Croc fans and it deflated because it tore a hole in it. Tim Armstrong had a Sharpie on him and they all signed it. Bradley signed it by holding the Sharpie like a child with his whole hand and he drew a picture of a giant penis next to his name. It's one of my most prized possessions to this day. King Scott King 1985 said, okay, so I have a plaque from being the shift manager of the year from the fast food restaurant I worked at. It's nothing special, but when I moved in with my wife and mother-in-law, it ended up getting packed up and brought. When my mill saw it, I made a Simpsons joke about it. I told her I was the shift manager of the year, and I received a congratulatory handshake, a glazed ham, the plaque and a phone call from Irvin Magic Johnson, who had used his last time out to call me. My mill apparently believed this story, not realizing it was a Simpsons joke, and apparently told several of her friends about it. Darnold McReynolds said, when I was 10 I won a contest at a booth in a Kmart in Upper Michigan to see who could stack the tallest single tower of Oreos in 30 seconds. The tower then had to stay upright for another 10 seconds or so. I think my older brother beat the old record by 1, then on my turn I tied him but I had time left and my Oreos looked sturdy so I threw another 5 and even though my parents told me I should stop, it stayed upright and they took my name and number down. After a week nobody beat my sweet-ass Oreo tower so I got a call saying I won, and had a chance to go to like, some sort of Oreo stacking regionals. I didn't know about that, and neither did my parents, so they sent me a cool baseball that says Oreo Stacking Contest 2002 that I keep to this day. Silent Horror 5443 said, I went to Disney a few years back, and I went to a bracelet section to buy a bracelet. There were Star Wars bracelets, and other Disney-themed ones. There was also a leather bracelet which I wanted to buy. Each Disney-themed bracelet had its own font with it. Star Wars used Galactic Basic, while the leather bracelet used its own font, IDK what it was. You couldn't get Galactic Basic text on a Frozen bracelet for example, So when I asked an employee to put my name and Galactic Basic on the leather bracelet, I expected to be shot down. Conveniently for me, they were new to the job, and did it anyway. If I recall correctly, an employee saw it when we were leaving and said that isn't allowed, but since I was young she said whatever and let us walk. I don't wear it cause I don't want to damage it. But I don't even know if it's really special or not. I feel like I was just tricked cause I was young. Cool nonetheless though. Emotional Ed 5026 said, "Last year I went to Mason City, Iowa to retrieve my girlfriend due to COVID. I got there only to find she had already gotten her tax return, purchased a brand new car, and left to California. While I was there, I remember the surf ballroom was close by, so I caught a taxi into town. I couldn't get into the surf ballroom due to COVID. Somebody so we hanging around me said that for $100 they will take me to the spot of the plane crash. Apparently tiny bits of metal or aluminum, I'm not sure which, can still be found there to this day. It's not anything significant though. The investigation's long over and its only value is sentimental. The guy that I got it from said it was from a piece of the wing." Dogpix Random Thread said, "I guess it's not mine since I gave it to NASA, but I found one of the astronauts' patches from the Columbia disaster in East Texas. Specifically East Panola County. Found this patch frayed hanging from a pine tree. Summer of 2003. Need to go through old stuff to find the letter from NASA they sent when my grandfather sent it to them, but I remember it like yesterday. Was on back porch of cabin with grandparents and noticed something hanging from the tree. My grandfather literally choked up when I showed it him." But Harold said, "I have an autographed baseball signed by the entire 1930 Cubs team. My great uncle was an autistic savant. You could ask him what happened on X date in the Y inning and he could tell you Hack Wilson homered to right field. Roger Hornsby ground out to second, etc. The team found out about him somehow and booked him a train ticket. From what I understand, he got to sit in the dugout with the team. I inherited it from my grandfather. There are 3 Hall of Fame players on the ball. That team was the only team in National League history to have all 3 outfielders hit over 100 RBIs. Vampira Princess said, "I have about 5 or 6 Mormon Bibles and books my dad found while cleaning out a job site. They all trace the family lineage back to at least the 1800s. I've been trying to locate the current descendants as I'm sure they would like the family heirlooms back. Also a bunch of children's school books in other languages from the 20s 30s, mostly Polish and Russian, that my one prof in college, he was fluent in 13 languages, said were interesting because they were meant for 2nd grade but were teaching concepts that the modern school system would teach about 5th grade. A lot of other random really cool stuff too. We have quite a few original flags with less than 50 stars. Tahoe except I believe I have some kind of degenerative disease that is slowly destroying my body. No doctor I have been to can figure out what is going on. I have had a lot of different work done. I think I may have something new. It seems like every day I feel more tired and more sick than the last. I am injured so easily I am scared of moving sometimes. I stood up the other day and my knee popped multiple times, probably a minor MCL tear. My memory is getting worse, I cannot focus for the life of me, mental fog is unbearable. Feeling so defeated it's insane. I am 26 and I feel like an 80-year-old. Mick Presh said, "I have my grandma's uncles, granduncles, yarmulke that has a lot of Nazi paraphernalia attached to it. He was a 2-time Jewish American POW during World War II, and was on Normandy Beach on D-Day. I haven't identified all of the things he pinned to it, but there are 2 silver eagles from Nazi officer caps, and a Hitler Youth pin. My dad didn't even know that he served in the war until after my grandmother had passed away and we found all of the stuff amongst her belongings. Dad said that he never once talked about it, and that he was a very quiet and gentle man. Considering everything he might have experienced, it makes sense." Giant Tips said, "BlackBerry from my time working at the Weinstein Company. They forgot to collect mine when I left in 2015. It won't turn on, and battery won't charge. Have thought of buying a new battery but it's not really that important right now. Separately, something I don't have but wish I have is my dad's retirement party video. His English was terrible, not that mine is stellar, and he sang one of his favorite songs, I Left My Heart in San Francisco. He sang nothing but Thosser words the entire song. He caught Alzheimer's and passed away 2 Januaries ago. It was the only video we had of him singing. smiling and still healthy. I made a backup on a hard drive and lost that too. Sometimes I'm upset that my relatives aren't as upset about losing it as I am. Hopefully the DVD and hard drives are just misplaced, but have searched everywhere. Upgrade wife said, I have a handwritten recipe book from my great-grandmother, late 1800s. Things like burnt sugar cake or Hasenpfeffer. Instructions include hanging the skinned rabbit to drain out the blood and age it a bit. A lot of the recipes assume you already know how to make part of it. Like start with biscuit dough, then do. Pity I don't know her recipe for biscuit dough. I know generally how to make biscuits, but how much dough did she start with? Another thing, cook in a slow oven for a while. Could you vague that up for me? I know a slow oven is low temp, which is vague enough, but how the hell long is a while? I keep promising myself I'll experiment with some of the recipes, but haven't yet. Dagafin said, my specific homemade hot-rodded electric fat bike. On the surface it wouldn't be that special. Started off with a pretty common DIY kit, but I wanted a torque-sensing bottom bracket and nobody in North America or Europe sold one in 100mm that fit the frame I was using. Had to track down and buy one directly from a random Chinese factory and adapt the wiring to fit the computer controller and figure out how to get them playing nicely together. I'm confident there is nobody else running a Cyclone 3000 motor on a fat bike with a torque-sensing bottom bracket in North America at least, especially now that commercially available e-bikes are getting more common. Weird Butt Stuff said, I have a limited DVD collecting a bunch of promotional videos set to the album it was promoting. There were 100 made. I got it signed by the whole band at probably their most famous show that they recorded and released about 13 years ago. I remember when I was getting them to sign it, one of the guitarists goes, "Hey man, what the hell is this?" Haha, he figured it out as I was telling him. The band is Between the Buried and Me and the DVD is called Synesthesia. I think it was re-released with their greatest hits, but the edition I own is rare and even rarer for being signed.